Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode on Earthling University. Mr. Tom Rose, he has a very unique idea for the youth community, as well as Mr. Brent Tillmans will explain different strategy of this university. And most important thing is that they have a plan for the developing nations, that how they can collaborate with the youth community and give them some changes in their careers. So I want to start with Mr. Tom Rose. How do you want to introduce this concept with our audience?
Well, yes, this relates to our project called Earth Plexus, which is a couple of decades old. Actually, it was originally a international student network, and when it was born, while I was in college, the idea of Earth Plexus was to increase communication amongst the youth, primarily in the U.S. and the Soviet Union, because at that time that was a real problem. There were the nuclear threat and talks were breaking down. And so the idea was if we increase communication with the youth in the Soviet Union at that time, by the times we were in positions of power, we will have developed a relationship. So that's how it started. And it went through a few phases. I moved it to Europe, spread the Earth Plexus gospel there for years. By the time we moved back to Los Angeles, we started a TV show called EP and recently, but then the internet came, and the platform of Earth Plexus became a little obsolete, which was good because now we could communicate with people more directly all over the world at any time. But we've recently rekindled the idea of Earth Plexus because because of TAFs, because as president and CEO of TAFs, we are taking very measured and deliberate steps in each country we go into to find the need and to work with governmental organizations and forge partnerships with universities and educational systems. And we're taking it slow because we want to get this right. As we start, right out of the gate, we want to get this right. And so, we're starting in South Africa. And as soon as we get that settled and we figure out the whole procedure, we will start migrating out and moving to other countries. In the meantime, we have people like you, areas like Malaysia, that could really benefit from what TAFs is offering young people. And so we wanted to set up a method to scout, to go to other areas and start forging relationships, start forging partnerships with universities, with organizations in specific categories, just to start developing that relationship. So when TAFs is ready to move in and use and present its whole host of options, they will be able to do that very easily. So we will have primed the pump, if you will, in each region that we go into. And so Earth Plexus is that originally. It's about going into certain regions like Malaysia, India, places that are needing this stuff now, to set up these relationships with universities, but also bringing with us the types of academic and educational concepts that are starting to emerge through TAFs, because there's a real need for young people to have access to really advanced learning and training and skills development right away. Because in general, the educational system isn't keeping up with the breaking paradigm, isn't keeping up with the needs of this AI automation age that we are in. And so and that makes sense because it's happening so fast that you can't really shift curriculums and you can't really hire new teachers or bring in whole new colleges into universities to address some of these things. So that's really what Earth Plexus is. It's a stopgap measure, a way to shorten the gap for students, for young people specifically, to give them the real world skills development that they need. Things about artificial intelligence and other technologies, energy, solar, because we are facing some very urgent existential threats. And it requires the knowledge base and the specific mindset of young people, these digital natives, to come in and start helping and help solving these problems. So Earth Plexus is an advanced team. It's a way to get to spread the ideas quickly to give a platform to the latest educational programs and skills development. Um, and so that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. Mr. Brentelman, how do you want to introduce this university's Earthling University concept as well as strategy for the youth community?
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously, of course, Tom was doing a great job explaining what we're doing in terms of shortening the gap and creating some opportunities for people to really be forward facing in this fourth industrial revolution that we're ushering into. A big concept that we've been discussing is helping people with learning real life skills that they can actually apply immediately. One concept that we've discussed is, to work with some of these organizations that are offering educational programs to that are that they're training their potential employees prior to hiring, and that would, of course, help the folks involved with Earthplexus find occupations and things like that. And so we're trying to just be, practical and pragmatic about it. And of course, we're trying to reach these nations that don't necessarily already have these types of opportunities, utilizing the momentum that we're already working with via TAPS. So.
Mhm. Thank you. At present, we are just like industry 4.0. Many things happening in the industry. Malaysia is a very good area and country where actually fourth industrial revolutions they are adapting in many ways with their manufacturing, with their educational hub. They are trying to improve, even though in the COVID period there are a lot of challenges. But beside that, I am observing from Asia Pacific, especially 60% of the population live in Asia Pacific. On the other hand, most of them actually youth, around 57-58% actually youth, those who are under 30 years of age. Government taking initiative, corporate taking initiative, but there are more scope that we can develop skills of this kind of youth, as well as we can give them chance to get involved with this industry. So what is the major strategic point of views of this concept that student can get benefit through this university, Earthling University, as well as they get their more benefit for developing their careers, entrepreneurships, and many more things. So, Mr. Tom.
You're muted, Tom.
Sorry about that. It was going so well. The one thing that what Earthplexus brings is three specific things right off the bat. It's a single governing body because there are so many organizations and so many networks that are doing good things and in different regions, but there, and it's almost an entropy because there's so many. So it's hard. One thing Earthplexus is designed to do is to bring specific organizations under one umbrella, under one place, one platform, in six specific categories. And it's a platform that's designed. The second part is it's a platform designed for sharing specifically ideas from young people, digital natives. So it's a single governing body. It's a single platform for people to start sharing information, and it's also brings into it a ranking system. And Brent could probably talk a little bit more about this, but it's a way for people to share their ideas, and people will vote. You can rank where this idea falls in the whole scope of things, and it will rise to the top. And so we will know the people that are involved with Earthplexus what most of the people are interested in, and what's the solutions that seem to get ranked higher and higher. So it'll really rise to the top, the most urgent needs, and solutions. And so that's the main thing. So the six meta categories, as I call them, that we're focused on, because it's also important to keep it as simple and as broad as possible. Otherwise, we do risk entropy. So the first is education. Obviously, we want to build networks with organizations that are based on education, that are focused mostly on young people and helping them train. And the idea is to go into each area and choose and get to know the area, and then find one organization or one institution that can head that specific meta category. And they'll have to meet certain criteria and whatever, and there will be a nice rotation of organizations that take on that category each time, depending on how important and well received and serious they are and active. So the first meta category is education. The second is sci-tech or science and technology. The third is the arts. Fourth is media. Fifth is business, and sixth is politics. And those kind of cover a broad range of concerns that some of the more urgent problems we are facing are in. And so, using these 6 meta categories and finding in a region a very active and youth oriented organization that's focused on that specific category, um, and having those 6, we can expand out. It's an exponential thing. And so, it can go down to the community level, the city level, the state level, and all within these 6 categories, so they can expand almost holographically. So that's the general idea. So the strategy is to first of all keep it simple, to be a single governing body with these 6 categories, to be a platform for young people specifically, either pose questions or invite ideas of the problems that need to be solved, and then having this ranking system so that we know in general what most people either in the region and globally are concerned about. So we're not spending too much time on some issue that isn't necessarily um, going to be a major threat or concern over time. We want to hit as many issues as we can, but we also want to focus them. And one of the main features of our strategy is what I call the interloper rule. And that will be the idea that, because it's it's a method of getting out of the box solutions to things. Because often if you are focused on science and technology or some region, some area of that, you it's really good to specialize in a certain category, but you can also tend to have blinders on, or you don't, or something that doesn't fit into the paradigm of your category. So the idea is to allow groups and members from other disciplines, from the other categories, to weigh in on the issues that most affect another category, and to actually require that. An interloper is somebody who comes in from somewhere else and into a specialization, and we want that to be a rule, because you can really find great solutions from people who are from other disciplines, because they're not constrained by the parameters and the rules and the traditions of a certain uh, discipline. So that's going to be a real key to this. And it's also something I've incorporated in TAFs as being a transdisciplinary mechanism. We want to seek polymaths, people who can do many things, because we're going to need people like that to solve these problems, because there's so many variables that I believe the age of specialization is on the way out. We need to look at systems in a holistic way, and uh, as part of shortening the gap between, because education right now is based on the industrial age, and it required specialization, and it required people to do specific tasks. But now, as we need to have a rule where we are inviting people to interlope, to have an opinion on something that's going on in another discipline, because you can bring in out of the box thinking. You can bring in ideas that nobody would have considered, because sometimes the less you know about a problem and its history, the more diverse and intriguing your solutions might be, things that people wouldn't have thought of. So that's just another part. So we've got the 3 aspects of the governing body, open platform, and the ranking system, and then including this interloper rule to invite people to submit solutions from different disciplines. So
Mhm.
that's the general strategy. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Brentelman. As you are also working with TAF, and beside that, you have a lot of engagement with the different countries' peoples. How, what your expectation? What type of feedback and other things you are getting from other countries, especially developing countries' youth community regarding these projects? Please unmute yourself.
So yeah, the feedback is the most important aspect. Tom was talking about this ranking system, and so right now I'm actually working with a handful of people from um, 5 different nations, 5 different countries, and we're working with a organization. There's the International Logic Party, and they've got a platform called the Egora, and the Egora is a platform that they've developed where every member is able to have an ideological profile that ranks their ideologies essentially, and different members are able to share their ideologies and see these different indexes to see how the group ranks these ideologies on the whole. And essentially I'm working with them and these folks in TAPS, and we're going to transition this model to work a little bit differently and to better fit our needs. And the idea is that the feedback is incredibly important, especially when we're working in all these different nations and things like that. You know, it doesn't, it's not as helpful to go into a place and to expect that we know what they need. It's a lot more helpful to go in somewhere and find out through the locals, you know, the natives, be it digital or otherwise, what their specific needs might be. And so to crowdsource these ideas, we're developing this concept with these folks. And essentially the idea would be that we would be able to enable these members of our communities, and TAPS will be the first organization that will be utilizing this model, but Earth Plexus will be helping other organizations and groups adopt a similar model to, as Tom was mentioning, you know, help diminish entropy and things like that. And essentially, what this model will be doing was that it will allow these individuals to be empowered, and it will decentralize communication quite a bit, and invert our typical leadership from the top down to more of a bottom up approach, so that we can really find out what these natives really want. You know, what people, if we go to Bangladesh, or if we're you know, going to India, Malaysia, you know, wherever we might be, we can actually source these ideas locally, and we can help the members in these areas connect with one another, everyone that's in their community that's relatively local to them, through this platform. And so that's one aspect of what we're doing as well. And so the feedback that we're getting on that is, you know, we're just kind of working towards developing this concept. And so right now, most of the feedback has been very specific towards this platform that I'm working on. But you know, I'm really looking forward to a tremendous amount of information and feedback that we can all learn from.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. Like, how do you want to develop this platform? It will be in fully online, or you want to focus on offline, developing campus? What's the idea? Or
Yeah.
what your strategy? Yes.
Well, you know, right now, because of we're all in lockdown, we are focusing it all online, and that's part of this trend that has been accelerated is moving everything online. Ideally, we want to do things in person. We want to go to these places. We want to bring people together, because there's so much that happens when people are together. There's so much, so many variables when you get people into one room that you can't really duplicate online. So that's ultimately when we get past this virus and this situation, we will want to bring people together in big ways and go see people, because there's so much that happens when people are in one place. And but a really big part of that is we're not coming in saying we have all the answers. That's why it's just like with TAFs, just like with Earth Plexus, it's about providing a platform and making that platform very specific to certain needs. And so we will require, like, your audience has been very important along the way in this past year. To It has changed the trajectory of my work. The feedback I get from your audience and young people in your area, in your region, has determined a lot of what we focus on, either with TAFs and now with Earth Plexus. The whole reason Earth Plexus came up at all is I was realizing there's such a need where you are in Malaysia and in India, and people can't wait for TAFs to get there. We want to do that deliberately and correctly in each place, because it's going to be a very sophisticated model that TAFS is. But we needed to be able to scout and to come to places and start building these relationships, because this is an urgent need. So a big part of this is how we're going to build it is getting feedback. Again, we're not coming with all the answers. We're coming with a platform. We're coming with a sense of urgency, and we need input. And that's the great thing about the ranking system is we will be able to see and track what is really on people's minds. We're not going to say this is what you should be worried about. You know, what we do want input. We want feedback from young people. We want to find out what each audience in each region is concerned about, because there might be people in Malaysia might be more interested in AI and certain technologies, and people in other regions might be more interested in some of the environmental issues. And so we want to be able to serve or give a platform to the people in those regions about what they're most concerned about. But at the same time, we will be able to see in a global way what the recurring themes are globally, so that we can provide services, events, opportunities, platform to on a global scale to handle all issues. So it's a really it's bottom up. We want to find out from students and young people what it is they're most concerned about in their region and globally, and provide quick access, quick answers that their universities or their schools may not have a course for yet. You know, and so we've got a few of these already building. We've got a curriculum that's building. We've talked about it, and in the
Mhm.
summit.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I just want to share one report from actually World Economy Forum. Then, and I just want to share that what's going on inside the industry. Uh, from industry, they have to up skills or retrain around 46% peoples. Like example, those who join from academy, like example, a student join from university to a industry has to train them 46%. Hiring from outside industry 18%. Establishing a strong pipeline directly from education only 17%. Hiring from competitors 14%. Changing compositions of workforce between permanent and contingents only 5%. So it's mean, like example, in modern education systems we cannot produce enough skilled people according to the demand of the industry. Even in this decade we are observing like around 1 billion job will shift in the technology and technology oriented things, and still I think that universities and academia they have to up like develop their curriculum, they have to change their curriculum, they have to engage with more industry, they have to adapt it the industry 4.0. On the other hand, Mr. Tom, you have a strong background on AI and AI related things, so what your observation, is it possible that your projects Earthling University can solve these things, that industry can get more trained youth community from your university's project?
Yeah, I think so. Partnerships with institutions, and it's not only universities that are the problem. There was a stat that came out a couple of years ago that I read that like something like 80% of major corporations, and this has probably changed since then. This was 2 years ago. 80% of corporations understand that artificial intelligence is going to change everything, specifically their industry. But only 3% of the corporations at the time were doing anything about it. They were hiring on AI people. They weren't, you know, so it was just so new that that even corporations who are driven by profit weren't doing anything yet. It's because it's too hard to get your head around. This has changed quickly in the last 2 years, because now we're seeing more organizations, more companies installing AI systems, and it's always led by the money. There's a lot of AI systems that are specific to sales, which makes sense. You know, that's the lifeblood of any company. And so you see a lot of innovations when it comes to AI for sales, which can generate leads and do all your cold calling and follow up and everything a salesperson would do, so that you give time for the salesperson to do the more human thing of building the relationship. So it's not the fault of institutions or universities at all. We are all kind of taken aback by this. We had a precursor when the internet around the turn of the century came in. A lot of people realized this was changing everything, but we were creating the lexicon. We were developing the departments. How do we handle this? And so we have a little example of how to manage paradigm changing advents. But yes, but that's the whole idea here, is that to give a platform to partner with universities and corporations. I do this myself, where I come into companies as a consultant and work with them, with their employees, prior to them installing an AI system or an automated system, because it's important to make sure that they feel that they are being augmented by this system rather than replaced or displaced. And there's ways to do that. There's ways to really bring out the uniquely human skill sets um, prior to, so that they get excited about working with these systems rather than feel threatened by and work against them. And so we need to do that on a mass level. And students need to do this. Like you say, that was a 50 something percent who companies that have to retrain students that come into their organization. And that's because the school courses haven't kept pace with the demands of the industry. And so that's another way of doing this, is to augment universities with organizations like ours, who will bring to the fore um, teachers, experts in these fields that are real world needs, and introduce concepts to schools and school supervisors uh, to include certain things, really simple things, in their curriculum early on. We need to, like, in a very early stage of young people who are these digital natives who arrive with their faces in screens, to entice them to develop relationships with AI. You know, we've talked about this too in the summit, how important it is for young people to develop a relationship. And we talked also about the idea that another reason for this lag is that people my age and Generation X and older, we had analog childhoods. We grew up with wires on our telephones, and so we kind of had to learn all of this stuff. But these young people are digital natives. They are of this age, and so that's why another reason there's this lag is because there is a generational gap, digital generational gap. And so that's another reason why Earthplexus and TAFs is so specific to inviting young member ideas to help mold these organizations.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brentelman. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think that Tom said a lot of great points, of course, but yeah, just to go back a second, I think that's something that we've been discussing, is just this idea of empowerment of individuals. I think that groups and organizations, people kind of get lost in there. You don't really maintain your individuality, and so something that we're really trying to do, as opposed to kind of these modern structures of where people kind of just feel like another cog in the system, is really kind of giving these people a voice, giving all the individuals in our group, in all these other groups that we'll be working with, a voice and an opportunity to kind of steer the ship in a way. As Tom mentioned, Sharif, just working with you has really kind of steered our ship and changed kind of our game plan a bit. And that's the goal, is that everybody can kind of bring their own aspect to what we're doing, and really help define this for us as we're defining it for ourselves. And that's really a big part of how we're trying to define things, is really to kind of collaborate, and co-create this whole environment for people to have this multi-tiered accessibility, to be able to learn about things through all these different approaches. And so it's I'm really excited about it.
Thank you. Mr. Tom, in COVID period, actually, our education systems, I want to say that not only Malaysia, not only Singapore, but other part of the world in developing nations, uh, it's actually hampered in many ways. Even example, every institution, they do not have the capacity to provide remote educations and remote learning opportunities to all of their students. One point because actually they are going outside to the education system. Millions of students, they do not have enough support for finishing their educations because of this COVID situation and other things. And we do not know what's happening next 2 3 years. So in that situation, what the new innovative things uh, your university has, your curriculum has, that it will attract youth community to engage with this kind of system and they will be benefited.
Well, it's interesting because this, just as COVID has accelerated all of these trends toward online learning and whatnot, and it's accelerated AI innovation, and so it has really increased its ability to take over many things. And so, in a way, and this is one thing that Earth Plexus can help do is to get this message out. Is that if we're kind of in a repose, we're kind of in a refrain right now because of COVID. We're all having to work from home, and for the students that you mentioned that are actually um, not able to continue to learn, they don't have access to the internet. But the real trend, I think, that needs to be emphasized is that shouldn't necessarily be a negative, because what we really do need to do in general as Earthlings is, as I say all the time, remember what it's like to be human. People need to relearn what it means to be human, because we have again been mechanized, and we have been conformed by the educational system to work in factories, and we've lost a lot of these skills and talents that we are born with, these intrinsic skills that these supercomputers we walk around with have. And so in a way you can see it as, if you get the message out there and you facilitate it properly and have something to do with it afterward, use it as a time to do that, to develop these and remember these very uniquely human skill sets. And it doesn't need to necessarily be a negative. But the key to this is getting that message out there. Don't feel in a state of lack because you can't get on the internet and learn the courses that were teaching you how to be a good industrialized person. Rather, own this time, use this time to go deeper, go to remember from centuries ago what your people in your region were doing, where your very unique cultural skill sets are. And because that's going to be the real value in this. Our real value as human beings isn't that we can stand on an assembly line and do stuff repetitively. It's none of that. That's something that the machine did to us over the last couple hundred years. Our real value is our ingenuity, our imagination, the arts, our ability to assimilate and be creative. And we've lost a lot of those things. And it doesn't mean that creative, like just being a painter or a sculptor. I mean, creative in being an engineer and coming up with inventions. We're a very ingenious species, and it's a real value that we'll need to develop and commodify and package to trade in a very big way. Now that AI and automation is taking over all of these menial tasks, it's my recurring theme. It's something I keep talking about. I've been watching a couple of interviews I've done recently, and it's the ongoing um, sermon that I give. But I think it's so important to understand that it's not necessarily a negative right now, that we are having to distance ourselves, or those people who don't have access to the internet to continue learning. It can be a very positive thing, because the trend has to be to create a whole new economy based on our imaginations and ingenuity and inventiveness, and really hone those skills.
Thank you, Mr. Brentelman. You have like very good communications with different developing nations like Pakistan, Indonesia, even Vietnam, and even China. So what the feedback you are getting from them? What type of challenges they are facing right now in education sector? Unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, of course, it's really different depending on nation to nation. I think that Africa, for instance, there's some of the folks that we work with in Nigeria and things like that. Obviously, there's certain degrees of infrastructure. A big issue out there too is just the corruption in general, political corruption, things like that. The people that I'm working with and discussing things in places like Pakistan, they're incredibly excited. Pakistan's really got some great entrepreneurial communities and projects and things like that, groups that are kind of working together and expanding their whole outreach together, and so there's definitely some excitement out there. And it's really just like Tom was talking about with the initial intention of Earth Plexus back in the 80s, to kind of bring these folks together, that are kind of in different places, different regions that might not necessarily work together. Like Pakistan and India, for instance. There's some tension out there, and and overcoming these seemingly menial, really, for an individual. It should be menial, these political disputes. They don't really they sweep us up, of course, they affect us, but the goal would be to overcome them, and to overcome them to kind of find this greater good that we can commune on together. And so I think that a lot of the excitement is there because of the fact that I think that people really enjoy working with people from different cultures. When you get down to the skin and bones of it, most people enjoy meeting people that are excited to interact with them. And so that's what we're really doing, is we're bringing these people together, that are excited about all this. And so when you share that excitement, it just continues to spread like wildfire. And so that's really what we're seeing at this point in the game, is just a tremendous amount of excitement, and people who want to get on board and support what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. Like, at present, actually, for the COVID, yes, we are in challenging situation, but for education industry or education arena, so what will be the best strategy to solve present challenging situation? What your advice for this developing nations, youth communities, even in the, I think, even in Europe, I think they are also in challenge. I think USA also have a lot of challenges, but what the major area we can focus right now in education, and we can solve the education problem together?
Well, I think one of the most important things right now is people in general need to understand how valuable their data is and how to monetize it. Um, because right now, corporations, large tech, big tech companies are just gathering data on us freely, and we need to understand that that's a very valuable asset that we have. And we need to figure out ways to educate people on how to monetize it. And we need to hold big tech companies that are using this data in their algorithms, to pay for it. And so, in this time of lockdown, one of the other benefits or silver linings of it is, that since we are having to retreat and come back and understand and be at home in our neighborhoods and in our communities and in our cultures, there is a globalization that's happening, and that's good, and it should continue. But it's only uh, powerful if we all understand where we're from and where we're at in our origins, and not in a tribal way, but in a appreciation of them. That's very valuable for someone, for instance, in Malaysia, who cannot connect right now or cannot get online, or the life has changed. Sit back and look at your culture and understand why your area has burgeoned the way it has blossomed the way it has, and really know. It's like they say the best authors write what they know. You write about your hometown, you write about what your experiences were growing up. This is the time to do that, to really get to know where we're from, and get to know our life experiences personally, and as different cultures, because that is valuable data, you know. And so it's a combination of educating people on how to monetize their data, on how to put a value on their behavior and all these things, but at the same time making that data more specific, more valuable, by understanding who you are, and not just being a human, but being a Malaysian human, or being an African human, or an American human. Earthling, and understanding that the differences in a way, and because that will promote appreciation of other cultures. We're seeing a rise. Well, I think hopefully it'll be um, on the fall now, but I think we're seeing a rise in tribalism for different reasons. People who are xenophobic, and because that's a way people tend to get when there's too much change, is they want to close themselves in and they want to keep things the way they were. And it's a kind of a natural trend. Most people, I think, aren't like that. Most people are explorers. Most people can appreciate differences. It's just that the people who are frightened have a louder voice sometimes in history. So I think that's the key. What my advice would be to young people is take advantage of this time off from the normal, and get to understand who you are and where you come from, because that's fascinating to other cultures. I'm fascinated by people in Malaysia and India and Africa. It's like, because it's so different than where I'm from, and it's just there's a mystique there, and that's why it's so important to travel and to go to places and just to sit with somebody who is from a different culture. That's what this is all about. And so take the time to own who you are, and then take the time to learn how to. We should all do this in general, find a way to do this, but to monetize that data of our behavior, how a Malaysian behaves differently than an American in certain circumstances, because that kind of information is extremely valuable to a big data firm. Um, and at the same time, another piece of information and advice that I give all the time, as often as I can, is to develop a relationship with AI now. And I'm not talking about Siri and Alexa. Don't just this relationship we have with those AIs is we bark orders at them. But we need to understand how to develop a relationship with AI, just as we need to understand how to develop a relationship with each other, because this is an emerging super intelligence. At some point, I believe it will become a self-referential, self-aware entity, and barking orders at it won't serve us. So take some time and download an app like a replica, or something, and just get to developing a relationship with your own personal AI companion, because that's going to be very important. I believe in the very near future, a student who leaves school and then shows up at a job interview and has an AI companion, some say companion artificial intelligence that understands it and understands its very specific skill sets that can augment it. It's like walking into a job application or a job interview with your own droid, some who is specific to your who augments your qualities and augments your talents and skills. So that's another big piece of advice I get, is to start developing a relationship right now with AI. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Brent. What your advice specifically for the developing nations, uh, education institutions, and the government and corporations? Unmute yourself.
Looking inwardly, as Tom was recommending, is absolutely of utmost importance. I think that something that I've noticed from the community that I engage with, or the communities that I engage with, is it really surprises me and it amazes me how wrapped up my international friends are with American politics. And so I think that that's interesting. The way that people really like to focus on problems that aren't necessarily theirs. And I think that that's a universal trait of humanity, is that we like to focus on other people's problems to kind of ignore our own. And I think that something that we're trying to do is to encourage people to go inward and deeply and identify their own personal issues that they see, that, because a lot of times the reason why people ignore these problems is because they feel powerless over them. They feel like they lack control. They don't have any escape. They don't have any method to overcome them. And so if we can encourage people to identify these problems rather than ignore them, then we can actually create solutions and work together to do this. And so I think that that's, again, why, there's such a strong push towards this empowerment of the individuals, empowerment of the Malaysians, empowerment of the Africans. And we're not just looking about the the groups specifically, because then the individual voices kind of get bogged down a little bit, and we really want to be as effective as possible, in terms of helping these specific individuals. And so I think that that's a major aspect as well.
Mhm. Thank you. Beside that, at present situation, we are observing even in developing nations, not only developing nations, everywhere, different kind of startup and entrepreneurship initiative actually growing, because example, many people lose their jobs and other things. But my question is that, as Mr. Tom, you are expert in AI, how different startup and innovative company they can work more on AI, how government should invest on AI related research, or corporate should engage more on AI. What your advice or what your guideline?
Well, what governments can do if they're smart is invest in 10 or 20-year plans. And I think the smart governments, the smart areas will do that. They will set aside a 10 or 20-year period, especially they should do it as soon as possible, if not already, um, to bring in AI and to encourage startups and private industry in their regions, and give them loans, tax-free loans, whatever it is, to spur this type of thing, because it is taking over everything, and we should let it. And a government has the ability to do that. They can see, and right now we're talking 10 and 20 years now is considered a long-term, plan. Not in China. In China, they think in generational terms, but that's just the speed of life now. And so if a country can decide to set aside 10 years between now and 2030 or whatever, 2040, and we're starting to see some of that happening in big ways, and make it a period of time to invest in AI, to bring in to support companies and startups and entrepreneurs who have ideas, and give them funding and give them leverage and leeway to do what they need to do. There will it's like in America during the 60s with the moonshot. After we were spurred on because Sputnik, the Russians put the first satellite in space, and so in a competitive way, America had to get to the moon. And that really happened. We said, well, let's do this. The government was able to say, we're going to create NASA, we're going to invest in this, so that by the end of the decade, as Kennedy said, we would have a man on the moon, and certainly they did. And we need to do that now when it comes to AI. We need to do that now when it comes to determining how to recreate our economy that's based on the things that we value, rather than some of these old paradigm things. So that would be my advice to any government, is to take the time and know that what you don't know, but give industry and private companies, and specifically startups and entrepreneurs, some space to do what they do, and give them funding or tax-free credits or whatever it is, and spend that time and make that investment in 10 years to see what happens, because the smart countries that do that will come out after that 10 years and be very well positioned for all their people. And in that meantime, in that 10 years, there will be a lot of innovations and a lot of growth, and trial and error, but it'll spur the country on, just as we were spurred on in the 60s. And so I think that's what's important. And getting back to the idea that Brent mentioned about how America, um, people are fascinated with our politics, and it makes sense because we do affect a lot of the regions of the world, and I think I was first exposed to that when I moved to Europe uh, after starting Earth Plexus. And when you're from somewhere, you don't really think about how other people see you. At least at that age, I was 19, and I was this was I was surprised at how many people understood American culture. They hated our politics at the time. This was the Reagan era. Um, and in fact, but so they hated our politics, but they loved our culture. I was a musician and a singer, and everyone was surprised that I didn't sound like Bruce Springsteen. I didn't have that same voice. So there's kind of some stereotypes that come with being an American. But I think what it is, I think why that is, it's not just because we're the superpower and we've got all this influence around the world or whatever. It's something else. And I think because America is kind of an experiment. We're the only country I can think of that has built on an idea. We are the mutts of the world. We've been kicked out of every, you know, um, respectable country. America is made up of immigrants, people from all over the world. It's been built by people. America is an experiment designed to on the idea of liberty and all the better angels of being a human. It's an experiment and has failed many times, and it's still uh, trial and error. But so I think what I've learned is that people in other countries, the way they see America, and they get disappointed when we make mistakes. It's not because right now we're probably low on the totem pole as far as how people perceive America, and because it's more of a reflection of humanity than it is of some specific country or government. Because it is made up of all of us. It's made up of all these Earthlings, the type of people that would travel across an ocean and brave a frontier, and we all kind of have that instinct in us. And America is the first country that has done that in a big way. So we're kind of a reflection of that better part of being a human. And I think that's why people are interested in what we're doing and why they have a vested interest in our mistakes and our successes. And so that's my perception on that.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. Mr. Brentelman.
Yeah, just Tom was talking about AI pretty extensively, and I think that something that popped in my mind was just robotics in general. I know that this week the company that created Sophia announced that they're about to roll out thousands of their robots, their humanoid droid robots, to help keep people safe through this coronavirus time period. And I think that it's. I also saw a news story about a couple men in Kenya that produced a prosthetic arm that used neural brain waves to activate it and control it. And seeing that kind of stuff, it's really, really amazing to me to see it, and especially to see these people in developing nations creating this kind of stuff that folks at MIT are working on, and it's cutting edge here. And so it's really interesting to see all that stuff, and so I think that to bring all that together will be really, really incredible. And I think that another thing about AI and robotics is that a lot of people they don't necessarily, it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. They're still kind of freaked out by it, xenophobic in a way. And I think that the way that we're trying to kind of crowdsource all this information and ideas, I think that we're also of a community of these futurists, these forward-thinking people that kind of we have these visions. We kind of understand how these things might work and how they're going to benefit us and how they could create problems as well. And so I think that as we to use one of the words I hear Tom use a lot, to coalesce with these people will really help subside and mitigate some of these concerns and some of these fears. Because I think that similarly to AI itself, I think that robotics and because right now AI is really just to the layman, to the average person, it's most people are like, oh, it doesn't really exist yet. It's not, because it's really like hidden. It's not really this concrete thing. It's electronic, and it's not really physical most of the time. But when you're having these robots and things like that, it's much more in your face. You can't really ignore it, and it's not easy to just slowly roll it out without letting people realize that that's what's happening. And it really freaks people out. I had a good friend of mine. She went to the doctor, a handful of months ago, and they didn't have a person there to check her in and to do all this. They had like a machine and a device, and she just didn't like that, But I think that when people understand the benefits of those types of things and how you're overcoming certain obstacles by not dealing with human error, and then those humans can actually utilize their traits that aren't even being, used, because there's not really, a human that's sitting behind a desk taking names and calling names is really not, living to their full potential. Maybe they are, in terms of the present moment, but the capabilities that we all have with our minds, and, our imaginations and things like that, there's no real limit. And so, to limit ourselves, into these opportunities where we're doing things that, a monkey or a robot can do, and to prevent a robot from doing this out of fear is just kind of silly. And so I think that it's really important to encourage people to use these technologies, because no one really wants to get left behind in this stuff, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If I could just jump in, that does make things more convenient, obviously, for the company that is using them, to have somebody just sign in and there's no human touch. But there really needs to be a concerted effort to have a human in that process, and so that's really what this technology can do. Like I mentioned, the thing about how sales organizations are really developing AI in a big way right now, because it's allowing salespeople not to spend hours cold calling or following up on leads and doing all that stuff. That AI can do that, to allow the human being to do what human beings do, and that's relate. And you bring up the idea of coalescence. I think that's very important. I think there's a difference between collaboration and coalescence, and that's my whole thing. Is, first of all, we should see AI as an extension of us. We should coalesce with it. It's really just, it's a really high tech post-it note. It's an extended mind thesis. It's something that's allowing us to do tasks and then focus more on our human qualities. And so my idea is like collaborative groups can come together, but a collaborative group can be pulled apart after the project is completed. But coalescence is the idea of how a stream that flows into a lake, you can't pull that water apart later. And that's the whole concept behind open source mode, is working with groups so that they coalesce over time. It's not necessarily about the specific problem that they're gathered to solve. It's a series of problems that they solve, and using techniques to help them coalesce so they become much more efficient. And so that's a really big principle in all of this, is coalescence, and not the very specific issues or even existential threats that we can solve, but getting to a place where we are coalesce as a people, and appreciate each other's cultures and backgrounds and niche expertise. And so that's a very big part of this, and that's a whole branch of courses that we can get into at some point, of teaching people methods to coalesce and to emerge their authentic state of empathy, because that's the best way to get people into that state. So it's very important, I think, in general, to get beyond the competitive nature, hierarchical nature of work and corporations and government, to a hive mind, to a coalesced principle of working together, and moving the machine to the side, letting the machine being augmented by the machine of AI and automation, to allow us to do these things. And so your example of your friend who didn't like the cold experience. Some of us like that. So if you're an introvert, sometimes fewer people are better. I go back and forth on that. I love being with people, and sometimes I can't be around people. But
it depends.
Yeah, it depends. But so there should be an option to have a human interface.
Definitely.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I think we have episodes with 4 different episodes with Mr. Tom Rose about this Earthling University. Next week, Friday, we have another sessions on that particular issues. So we will discuss more about this initiative, and hopefully by this way we can collaborate more university, school, and college, and we can change the ecosystem, and we can help lot more youth community. World Talent Economy Forum, Asia Research and Development Institute, Al Noor Academy, we are working together. We are trying to developing a better ecosystem in the developing nation with the help of modern science, engineering, and technology. I want to give special thanks to Mr. Tom Rose, even his organizations, for all of his support for World Talent Economy Forum. This year, April, we are arranging a big conference with International Islamic University. Definitely, he will be one of the keynote speakers, Mr. Tom Rose, even Mr. Brent Elmans. Even we will invite more speakers from Transhumanist Party and from different part of around the world. We already have 300 different speakers from 100 different countries, and we have more than 200 corporations, as well as around 100 university, school, and college, those who are supporting us, and 5 million people already we reach only in India. we engage with 1 million students. With the help of this Earthling University, hopefully we can solve many problems in the society. So I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. First, I want to request Mr. Brent Ellman, then Mr. Tom Rose.
Sure. Tom was talking about coalescence and talking about a stream feeding a river, and a concept that just kind of popped in my mind was the idea of making a stew. And when you make a stew, you mix all these ingredients together, but when you're eating the stew, they still retain, the beef doesn't look like potatoes, but they all kind of taste. There's part you can't deconstruct the stew. It's still the stew, and so I think that that's what we're trying to do here with Earth Plexus, is bring all these people together, help them maintain their individuality, but help kind of blend and coalesce into something greater. So I think that that's really what we're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Tom.
Yeah. Now I'm hungry. Not for people, but yeah, I think in the next couple of episodes for this, we can get into specific ideas for courses, actual things that we could do, programs that we could present to students, specific ideas of how to partner with universities and actually introduce courses that augment their training. So I think that's the place to go next. And thanks again, Sharif. Your support of all these organizations is brilliant.
Thank you. As much as possible, we are always open for the good initiative, as you are taking very good initiative, especially for the youth community. We are always with you, and we will solve together many problems, especially for the youth community. Thank you for joining today's session. Hopefully in the next week, Friday, we have another session. Then I'm sure many of the youth community can change their life with your projects. Thank you for today's session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.